Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so excited about today's webinar. Just a few quick notes. If you have any questions, please go ahead and drop those into the Q&A box. Any other chat or any other comments you want to make, or if you need technical support, please use our chat box. And this session is being recorded. The recording will go out to everyone who has registered for this event within the next 24 hours. With all those housekeeping notes out of the way, I'd like to turn this over to IAOP's CEO, Debbie Hamill. Debbie, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Amanda. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. This program, brought to you by Capgemini and Everest Group, will take you on a journey as these experts lay out a roadmap to future-proofing supply chain management, building resilience and agility through digital transformation. This is, of course, a very timely top-of-mind topic, and we have a full house for this program today. I'm sure you will all take away valuable information you can put to use right now. So let's get started. It is my pleasure to introduce Shirley Hung, Vice President of Everest Group. Shirley, it's all yours.
Thanks, Debbie. I'm very pleased to be here today with Jörg to speak about the need for our organizations to future-proof their supply chains by building resilience and agility through digital transformation. First, just in case some of you are not familiar with what we do at Everest Group, we are a global research firm that focuses on global services. We have nearly 200 analysts covering market trends and developments, service provider capabilities, and location strategies and analysis that may impact how business process services, IT services, and engineering services are delivered. Specifically, I lead a team of analysts who develop syndicated and custom research on horizontal functional areas in business process services, including supply chain management services, procurement, finance and accounting, and customer experience management services. Jörg?
Thanks, Shirley. Jörg Junghanns, pleased to be presenting to you today together with Shirley. So I'm a vice president with the Capgemini group, and I'm responsible for our digital supply chain operations business across Europe. Now, Capgemini, the group, is one of the largest service providers when it comes to consulting and advisory, engineering, technology, transformation, as well as operations. And I'm representing what you see to the right of this page. So that's where business operations and business services happen. And in supply chain, we're delivering supply chain services to our clients. In other words, we help them operate parts of their supply chains. And we do this across more than 100 countries with thousands of supply chain specialists bringing in their capability and expertise to help operate more resilient supply chains. And what that means in some more detail, that's what Shirley and I would want to get closer to you today. So back over to you, Shirley.
Thanks, Jörg. So as we've all experienced, the COVID-19 pandemic has really caused disruptions to the global supply chains on an unprecedented scale. And while some geographies now appear to be recovering and reopening their economies, which is great, other geographies are still experiencing surges and are reestablishing shutdown restrictions. So this is continuing to create great uncertainty for supply chain management, which is likely to last into the next few months, if not the next few years. So these challenges have amplified the impact of underlying shortcomings in traditional supply chain management practices, such as we've shown on this slide. Unstructured risk and compliance management, fragmented technology architecture, and inefficient capacity and resource utilization were all heavily exposed as areas of significant vulnerabilities for many organizations. Other areas of exposure include standard challenges in terms of high operating costs, reactive decision-making techniques, and a lack of process integration. So Jörg, given your experience over the past year or so, Have you seen organizations struggle with these shortcomings? And can you share a few examples from an operational perspective?
Sure, definitely. Let me start with stressing what you just said, that we're talking about an amplification through the pandemic of these shortcomings, right? All of these have been there before. The pandemic just pushed them to the surface and made them not only more visible, but make everyone in all of these supply chains actually feel what these shortcomings really mean in a stress situation. And these problems and shortcomings observed right now obviously leave a big imprint on the operational layer of a supply chain. And if I just were to pick a few, so unstructured risk, I believe was especially noted, for example, in procurement, as it comes to inventory strategies relying to offshore procurement primarily. Now, whereas just-in-time procurement and deliveries is a great thing to have in an undisrupted environment, the pandemic and unmanaged risk environments were showing us very clearly what this means if there's no regional backup, right? So far for unstructured risk. Now, picking another one, going towards a lack of end-to-end process integration, which prevents companies from swiftly reacting to how the supply chain value network reacts during the time of disruption, because suddenly and unexpectedly, unforeseen demand patterns appeared where demand is being a lot higher or a lot lower. And then if you're not integrated too much, these demand spikes or drops obviously greatly impact the way the supply chain is functioning, ending up not only in higher costs for inventory management or inventory holding, but also to a loss in revenue and sales. Now, challenges related to process disintegration are very naturally amplifying inefficient capacity and resource utilization. So I believe by picking 2-3 of them, it's easy to embed all of the others, which are interrelated, into that landscape of shortcomings.
Thank you, Jörg. You know, what struck us is that while some organizations were better prepared to deal with these disruptions than others, none really had global shutdowns as a scenario to plan against, right? And so moving forward, there is reason to believe that even with the pandemic in our rearview mirror, uncertainty and disruptions are likely to remain an ongoing challenge for many organizations. So it's vital for organizations to future-proof their supply chains. And in the rest of this webinar, we'll be talking about how organizations can do this and the critical role that digital technologies play to build supply chain resiliency and agility. So as we look across industries, we see 3 key supply chain management themes governing business model changes: risk management, demand management, and cost optimization or operational efficiency. The level of change in these 3 dimensions varies significantly across industries, depending on the amount and type of disruption each faces. In the paper that we published on future-proofing supply chain management, we provide details on how organizational practices prior to COVID-19 changed due to the pandemic and how that may differ by industry segment. But for today, I just wanted to call out a few practices that many organizations are embedding to future-proof their supply chains. From a risk management standpoint, they are using risk management tools to continually and proactively evaluate risk across their extended supply chain network, which would include tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers. Organizations have been activating BCPs, or business continuity plans, to secure critical inventories and access alternate suppliers when needed. This also involves redeveloping and upgrading BCPs to support ongoing and anticipated disruptions. And then as for demand management, organizations are using predictive analytics and machine learning to turn data into insights to predict rapidly fluctuating demand. They are rebalancing supply chains based on current demand situations and building adaptability to change by sensing market parameters and signals at various points of the supply chain. And this enables inventory movements to accommodate short cycle demand shifts and allows focus on production agility to support rapid replanning and rescheduling. And we can't ignore organizational efforts around cost optimization and operational efficiency. Operations are replanning and reprioritizing given declining revenue or through evaluation of alternate revenue sources. They are aiming to achieve optimum utilization of critical workers through effective talent management practices to sustain operations and promote a culture of well-being, as well as reviewing and adjusting the supply chain management delivery model to harvest global talent and cost advantages. In addition, organizations are focusing on reducing overall time to market by limiting the need for manual intervention for tactical tasks through supply chain automation. As I've been mentioning, resilience and agility are key traits for supply chain success, especially in times of crisis. And for those of you who are racing fans, regardless if it's car races or foot races, racers need to continually monitor their equipment and well-being, keeping an eye out for any changes in conditions to ensure they always have a clear picture of both the current and upcoming circumstances. This constant information flow helps racers anticipate issues, take calculated risks, and react quickly when unexpected events arise. And by being prepared, racers can not only finish the race, but can potentially emerge ahead of the rest of the pack by pivoting to meet challenges and using those challenges as opportunities to gain ground and improve their practices for future races. When we think about organization supply chains, they could also use resiliency and agility to achieve similar results. Resilient organizations have a dynamic operating model to anticipate and respond to disruptive elements and undertake proactive measures to strengthen operations. Agile organizations ensure that their processes are flexible and integrated so that they can respond quickly to market changes. And transparency in operations is also a key characteristic of a resilient, agile supply chain, as it mitigates risk through visibility and real-time information sharing. We'll be discussing these points in more detail in the upcoming slides. But in the meantime, Jörg, I'm interested in your take. While what I've shared is conceptual, how do you see these characteristics come together on a more practical basis?
Yeah, Shirley, I really like the racing example. And as pointed out, it's creating insight into operations is key. But then it is even more crucial what you do with these insights, how to learn from them, whether you're able to actually make use of the generated information. So whether corporations are able to put all of the insights generated into one place and then not only react on them, but be able to also anticipate and mitigate. Whereas racing is a great analogy, it may be to simplify, right? Because a supply chain, or better, a supply network, is a complex beast to master. And so looking at dynamic operating model, right? So we're a dynamic operating model, as well as in combination with supply chain transparency, are key enablers to achieve process integration, right? And then integrated process landscapes themselves provide even more visibility and dynamics to run a supply chain. It comes across like in a perpetuum mobile, or a self-turning spiral, upwards if you get it right, or even downwards if corporations are not acting to transform their supply chains. Now, you asked me for a practical example. Now, practically, this is obviously very difficult and complex to think through. Now, imagine you would know some of these outcomes up front, huh? And that's what we try to achieve practically by applying a digital twin model, or a digital twin approach, which leverages processual visibility as well as stress testing transformational crisis situations before they even occur, right? So it's trying out things before actually starting a transformation. And so anticipating potential outcomes, business outcomes, driving resiliency and also agility. With more integration, on the other hand, we're able to leverage end-to-end visibility and clearly see the impact of upstream operations on downstream areas, which means that fixing things upstream will very naturally have positive and beneficial impacts on downstream process areas, and further reduce bottlenecks and reduce touches, as we say, as we increase supply chain autonomy. It's like a rock thrown into the water, right? It creates circular waves going all directions. And so the same like integration, transparency, and dynamics in an operating model combined, that's how they reach and impact further functions across the organization coming from within the supply chain. And so next, I believe, let's look into some of more of the specifics when it comes to components of a dynamic operating model, Shirley.
Absolutely. There are many benefits to implementing a dynamic operating model with the right set of digital tools. Nearly 80% of firms that adopt a digital native operating model say they are on their way to establishing market leadership in their respective industries and are in a better position to serve new markets and customer segments. Furthermore, firms that use a digital native operating model have realized an average of 1.7 times greater cost savings than those that have not initiated these changes. This slide outlines the key components of a dynamic operating model, which includes strategy, market sensitivity, talent, organizational structure, processes, stakeholder alignment, and digitalization. So Jörg, again, based on your experience, are any of these factors more important than others? And is there a sequence that organizations should be considering when they embark on their transformation journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I believe importance and sequence largely depend on the maturity state of each and every supply chain out there. And let me start with clarifying a big myth. A dynamic operating model, as it relates also to digitalization, goes far beyond the implementation of a piece of software, right? So I truly believe the importance of software ranks second, whereas more critical are streamlining processes, the governance around it, and talent before jumping into a digital transformation, trying to achieve a dynamic operating model. And what I see is that when corporations try to prioritize and sequence these levers, it oftentimes is neglected to take care of the processes or of some processes, not only of their integration, but also of capabilities like supply chain data, which form a critical foundation, I believe, to actually getting started with making an operating model more dynamic. And once such foundation is laid, I would start upstream with data first and then improve insight into demand. So that's planning, and then improve the reliability of fulfillment and so on and so forth. So from an analyst and research perspective, Shirley, what are some of the best practices that you would call out looking at process integration, the second characteristic, as you say, of a resilient supply chain?
Yeah, thanks, Jörg. As supply chain managers evaluate components that result in better decision-making, they need to shift from siloed processes, technologies, and systems to an integrated customer-centric program. Process integration is not a one-time activity. It is a part of the day-to-day function of the supply chain. And in this slide, we share best practices in process integration, which include conducting current state gap analysis at a detailed process level to create a roadmap towards ensuring communication and data exchange across multiple stakeholders. Standardized processes ensure consistency in customer experience across geographies. However, it is important to note that standardization does not mean that all sub-processes should be managed centrally. There needs to be process flexibility to address local needs while ensuring alignment to the overarching strategic vision. Best practice entails the whole supply chain ecosystem, including OEMs and suppliers, working toward a common goal in serving the customer. With this alignment, supply chain efficiency improves and risks are reduced. Information is shared transparently across the supply chain with partners, thereby optimizing collective performance in creating, distributing, selling, and supporting the end product or service. Internally, various functions are also collaborating in key processes to evaluate supply chain relationships. And all of this is supported by regular feedback and continuous improvement across different functions and geographies, such that the organization can remain open and adaptable to the changes needed to meet process integration objectives. So Jörg, what are the first steps that organizations should consider when they're thinking about process integration?
Right. I think process integration sounds a lot more straightforward than it actually is, simply because it again relies on some foundational prerequisites, similar to the ones I just touched upon already when we talked about the dynamic operating model. And these tie back to the importance of streamlined data, I believe, an organization's culture, as well as involving the right talent. Now, supply chain resilience, or we could also call it frictionless operations to some extent, through process integration is an evolution, not a revolution. What that means is that it happens, as you say, step by step. It's not a one-time task, and it can't be forced upon an organization or its workforce. So I think the most important advice is to have your supply chain data sorted before actually getting started and executing any other transformation project. And I think process integration further relies on a certain level of excellence and maturity within the various supply chain disciplines prior to integrating them with one another. So what I mean is, before we try to, for example, connect finance to the supply chain, we want to make sure that there is a frictionless, seamless flow of supply chain operations from data through planning, through fulfillment and logistics and procurement. And achieving excellence in each one of these stacks, I believe, is another foundational prerequisite before further integrating processes on a corporate level.
Thanks, Jörg. It's undeniable that digital levers are enabling more effective and future-proofed supply chains. And consequently, we are seeing companies accelerate their supply chain digital transformation journeys, investing in this space, even under what may be otherwise cash and capital constrained environment. Organizations need to consider elements such as digital enablement, operational revamp, organizational alignment, and continuous innovation in order to undertake successful digital transformation. Digital enablement entails using digital levers to enable process integration that we just talked about and transparent operations concepts, that are incredibly important. However, digital enablement on its own is insufficient if the operating model is immature with decentralized teams and non-integrated processes that slow down decision-making. So therefore, digital transformation roadmap must also consider operational revamp, including existing talent and capabilities, organizational structure, and process workflows. A robust digital transformation strategy also builds on a shared purpose and vision, which Leadership must communicate to all employees to ensure ongoing organizational alignment. Consistency and clarity in understanding the change journey among all stakeholders and leadership is a necessary component to accelerating digital transformation. And furthermore, innovation is the only way businesses can go beyond meeting existing business needs to addressing changing business needs. Driving major transformation efforts cannot be a one-off event. It really requires a constant injection of new ideas, and change management, as we all know, is an ongoing process. So within the supply chain management space, many different levers can help advance digital maturity. We show a few examples of these on this slide, and we've also detailed them out in our paper with use cases on, automation, AI and analytics, control tower, IoT, and blockchain. Jörg, do you see any other levers that can improve digital maturity?
Yes, indeed. I think there's maybe one more aspect I want to bring some more light into it. So what we see here is the who is who of digital enablement, right? And those are all great, given they come on top of an operational or a process transformation. Remember, so I'm a true believer that data, processes, talent, and governance comes first before implementing digital technologies. Now, whereas deploying selected RPAs may an easy thing to do, and deploying these ones, be it a technology or in the case of a control tower, more a concept, is a lot more complex to do. Now, I remember meeting clients who don't have the time or do not want to wait for any one of these, let's call them bigger technology or bigger approaches, and they desire quality improvements and economic impacts immediately. And now that brings me maybe to a tiny aspect which may missing, which is I want to call small tech, right? With small tech, at least that's my personal or Capgemini's definition is the opposite of big tech, obviously. So small tech comes at a comparably low level of investment, still yielding big benefits and business outcomes. And so Capgemini in such situation brings proprietary tools that tackle very specific challenges which may happen across the supply chain most often, like let's like in manual order processing or master data validation, right? Where we know specific problems sit when it comes to operationally transform parts of the supply chain. And so in these smaller techs, they don't require a long time to be around, and they don't require an immediate functional transformation, right? But they efficiently support in terms of certain narrow but burning operational challenges. And again, just repeating, small tech means low deployment timelines and high impacts, which still comes at a minimal invest. And powerful digital enablers we use when operating supply chains, those actually accelerate value creation. And I'm not trying to say at all that these digital enablers shouldn't be considered. The opposite is the case. I believe when figuring out how to get started and maybe considering a control tower or implementing artificial intelligence may be a super big endeavor, there's other options to get started, while sort of the bigger solutions may need some more time to be around. And in the meantime, still giving us or giving the supply chain the ability to generate transformational benefits. So from here, I believe, back to you, Shirley.
Yes, so we've discussed what it means to future-proof supply chain management. And while it may seem daunting, there is a lot of support available for organizations to access. And we are seeing an increasing interest by organizations to outsource key supply chain management processes to accelerate their digital transformation journeys. An outsourcing partner's role can be quite broad, such as driving the end-to-end transformation of a supply chain management value chain, or it can be niche, such as digitalizing a specific SCM process or helping connect the dots in a non-integrated process and technology environment. Service providers can combine standalone technology solutions, such as logistics control tower that Jörg just talked about, and process automation, with more consulting-led solutions, such as supply and demand planning, to provide holistic business outcome-based solutions. The benefits of partnering with an outsourcing provider can include cost savings and operational sustainability, diverse partnership networks, scalability and flexibility, access to advanced technologies, as well as better utilizing the existing technologies that you have in place, better risk management practices, and access to skilled talent. Jörg, from your experience, what makes a difference to your clients' ability in achieving these benefits from outsourcing?
I believe the big difference is made coming from reliability to actually deliver these benefits, right? Because that's what it's all about. Partnering with someone needs to enhance the likelihood that the promised or expected business outcomes actually do appear. And adding to these benefits and the increased likelihood that those materialize, I would add like 3P: passion, and pace, and professionalism. And what I mean with this is basically having someone on the side to purely focus on such supply chain transformation and because transformations have become too complex to just do them on the side on top of operational work, right? And having someone to rely on, and someone specifically to put skin in the game, again, increases the likelihood of actually generating these business outcomes. And that's what it's all about. And the benefits of partnering also sit in not only the capability, but also the assets that a partner would bring. And I think that's easiest to explain with the next visual, which I would want to explain by starting at the bottom left, right? So I believe that there's 5 major pillars which make up a good partner when it comes to supply chain operations. First is having a vision, right? And our vision, Capgemini's vision, is the frictionless supply chain, and by removing frictions in the supply chain, this naturally will result in supply chain resilience and more agility. And so the thought leadership behind, and in combination with experience and expertise, that's one of the key pillars, I believe, that such partners should bring. Now, at the back of such concept lays, in our sense, or in our situation, a unique set of methodologies and process models which enable us to operationalize visionary thinking and strategy into tangible and pragmatic, proven and reliable supply chain operations. And the leverage of such best practices, which have sort of been established over decades, if those are directly injected into how our clients, for example, operate their supply chains, that's what makes a difference, not only quality and reliability wise, but also time wise, as we know that there's more value in business outcomes if they incur earlier rather than later. Number 3, I briefly touched upon this, providing the option, and it's not a necessity or a prerequisite, but an option to simulate things using a digital twin approach, right? So seeing whether or not actually, and to what extent, a supply chain transformation will result in the expected benefits, be it resilience and agility, or be it other more higher level business outcomes like revenue improvement or operational efficiency. Number 4, we kept talking about digital enablers, about digital transformation, about the use of AI, blockchain, and all of these great things. But why not trying it out in a very client-specific context and finding out whether or not, or finding out about the value of such investments on the one hand, and about the relevance to a specific supply chain situation on the other hand, because not every supply chain needs artificial intelligence to make the first steps when it comes to improving resilience, right? And now with our supply chain labs, where we can try out these things, where we have co-ideate and co-innovate with our clients, that's just a great space to try out things and be sure before the start of a transformation that directionally the right decisions have been made. And then last but not least, it is all about digital enablement and digital tooling. As I tried to imply before, when I talked about small tech, there's a number of things Capgemini, for example, can bring to the table, so that small proprietary assets which help fix immediate problems. And of course, giving our clients access to our alliance ecosystem, which consists of, I guess I'm proud to say, all of the major ERP and supply chain platform providers, as well as some of the niche supply chain technology providers. Giving access to these obviously is another big component, because I believe we would all agree that without technology, it's not going to happen. And all of this combined will foster what we call an industrialized supply chain operations platform. And this then helps to achieve more excellence when it comes to the demand, supply and inventory planning, helps to achieve more reliability and fulfillment when it comes to order processing and logistics, helps to achieve procurement mastery, and helps to achieve more quality and consistency in supply chain data. And so these are the ones which I would call out are sort of the key things that an outsourcing partner, a supply chain operations partner, needs to bring to the table. At least that's what's been proven from the Capgemini side, what we see on the market. So this is where we are, Shirley, and I believe we are ready for questions if there are any. So I saw things happening in the chat. However, I haven't had the chance yet to actually review whether questions came in. So let's look at these. So there's Scott asking that even though we have heard the clarion calls for resilience after pretty much every major disruption over the decades, and even though it's been taught in supply chain courses, it still happens, right? So yet here we are. What is the difference this time? What and who are today's barriers to do the right thing? Thanks, Scott. I really like the question. And the whole point is, I started talking about supply chain resilience 6 or 7 years ago, and no one just wanted to listen, because whatever you would want to undertake to improve supply chain resilience came at a price, right? It was associated with an investment. And at the time, back then, at least, the majority of my conversation counterparts weren't ready to engage with these investments. So operations efficiency in a supply chain, just in time over regional procurement and sourcing backups were operational efficiency and cost reduction in the supply chain were key to achieve. Maybe supply chain resilience was an aspect which was simply missed out, and maybe we needed the pandemic now to actually bring it back onto everyone's agenda. And ever since the pandemic started, supply chain resilience is a key topic on each and every agenda when we talk to our clients.
Yeah, I think the only other thing that I would kind of add to that is that, at least based upon my conversations over the course of the last year or so, I've really seen an openness for organizations to take hard steps to make changes, things that, there's this broad recognition that the runway in which organizations have to adapt and change to their environment has become shorter and shorter. And if they don't make those transformational changes, they're rapidly going to become uncompetitive and irrelevant going forward, right? So the biggest kind of component to the biggest barrier, I think, to any kind of transformation of the type that we're talking about is actually organizational resistance to change. And to me, I think that is the biggest difference in the current situation that we're seeing here, is that there is that openness now to do something different to the status quo.
Right, and to be ready for change, or for something new to happen. And that's a next question which came in, which addresses basically with any transformation journey, overcoming a culture of inertia can be a real barrier to change. So often organizations feel inhibited by legacy technology and large investments needed to modernize them. How do you help your clients through these challenges? And that's another really valid question. And I believe it starts with developing a change culture, and establishing a continuous improvement focus, which can be done by focusing on quick wins first, right? Find the low-hanging fruits, which can already bring value to the business. And with this, getting more and more people in the boat, and help overcome inertia by proving the relevance and the benefits of a transformation which is on the horizon. And preparing a transformation plan within achievable but also ambitious goals and clear deadlines is another important thing to be considered, because many times what we observe is that there is a plan, but no one's going to commit to it. And then as time flies and goes by, the relevance and validity of such plans seem to dilute. Again, repeating, starting with process transformation, I believe is critical to get started at first, before starting to engage onto a major technology play. And instead of investments into large investments into technology, again, let me point back to what I call small techs. Maybe there's more pragmatic approaches to fix some of the most burning platforms at first, and then starting to tackle the really big topics. Change management is key, without a doubt. And what tends to read like a catchphrase is really something that needs a lot of dedication. And of course, we have seen many transformations fail simply because of an absence of proper dedication to change management. And so let me close my response with stating that supply chain transformation is an evolution, right? It's not a revolution. So get started now with small steps, and this should then also help to overcome the culture of inertia, as the question put it up.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think, the benefit of kind of looking at small tech, as you put it, and point solutions help you gain organizational buy-in through delivery of some quick wins, and that oftentimes creates some momentum to do and tackle kind of harder changes. And the point about change management, it's really kind of funny. Whenever I look at a transformation roadmap kind of plan, a lot of times change management is kind of a separate line item going across, right? And it's like, of course, you need to look at change management, but when that happens, a lot of times it's also the first item that's cut when you're trying to reduce a project budget, and that is the biggest point of failure, because change management has to be integrated and incorporated into a transformation plan, and it is the most critical factor to sustaining any kind of change and improvement. And so my advice has always been, don't list it as a separate item. It has to be embedded and integrated into your project plan.
All right, Jörg and Shirley, we have a couple other questions that have come in here into our chat. So Andy's asking about blockchain is much hyped, but in his view, has yet to achieve a compelling use case. How does the panel see blockchain delivering in supply chain?
I guess I could start off, and Jörg, please do add. Blockchain has been hyped quite a bit. Clearly, the benefits of blockchain within the supply chain environment is, I think, pretty well established and agreed upon because of the nature of the distributed ledger and the security aspects of it and so forth. What is very kind of controversial around it is kind of going back to the topic of change management and the ability, to implement it. It does require, I think somebody else here has said, it requires the entire ecosystem to agree, right, to do it. And that takes a huge, immense effort. I've seen other people talk about, kind of the environmental impact as well, because of the sheer processing requirements to operate the blockchain sometimes is an inhibitor and so forth. But to me, the biggest barrier is that that stakeholder buy-in component. I think, unfortunately, with the pandemic impacting global economies the way that it has, I do think that it has postponed and delayed the adoption of kind of these large-scale transformative type of levers by probably a few years. This is my personal kind of opinion about it, because organizations really are trying to focus on shorter term type of impacts. So it's still a space that is, I think, to be proven, in my opinion. And there could be other technologies that will arise in the meantime that will be easier to implement, that will still deliver the same type of benefits before it will really take flight.
Okay, great. So we have a question here, what about sustainability?
Sustainability is an area that we're hearing a lot about, actually, and to the extent that Everest Group as a firm, we've actually decided to invest in doing some specific research into the area of sustainability. I think it is definitely on the rise. It's within a lot of organizations are actively working it into their strategies, as well as their kind of both internally as well as kind of their external kind of facing plans of action, because I think consumers themselves also are interested in doing business with organizations that have sustainability as part of their agenda.
Okay, perfect. All right, we have another question here from Len on the topic of routes to add resilience. What do you see as a role for 3D printing in supply chains?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because the quick answer is yes, it's supposed to add resilience, at least on the supply side, right? And interestingly, 3D printing was on every slide talking about digital enablement, like up to 2-3 years ago, or 3-4 years ago. And I wonder why it disappeared. And I mean, pragmatically, the reason for why it disappeared is that many of our clients simply haven't picked up on it, right? And the absence of a clear business case, or in the absence of the benefit promise that it makes overall, also operationally and functionally. And maybe another reason is it's been discussed, or we've been discussing 3D printing for about 6 or 7 years, and it may not have made that super step, that leapfrog step that may have been required to actually increase relevance within the supply chain. And from a neutral perspective, or from a conceptual standpoint, I still believe it is very relevant depending on the industry sector, but replacing printed products with or replacing products which are shipped from far away with printed products is definitely helping to accommodate more supply chain resilience.
Okay, great. So with any transformation journey, overcoming a culture of inertia can be a real barrier to change. Often organizations feel inhibited by legacy technologies and large investments needed to modernize them. How do you help your clients get through these challenges?
We just had that, Amanda. I think was
sorry.
the first or the second question.
Okay.
We talked about that.
Let's see here. Let's see if we have any additional questions. We spoke quite a bit around, let's see, we talked a little bit about the supply chain, but I didn't ask this one directly, so there may be more. Do you feel that many companies have simply cobbled together software tools in their endeavor to achieve supply chain management?
Okay, so let me go first. Another very interesting question, because looking 10, 12 years back, that's actually been a situation which we have observed a lot. And then the holy grail to all of this was platforms, right? We engaged into the platform economy. Everything was supposed to be integrated and be a platform. And now 10 years later, where there's a lot of platforms around, specifically in the ERP space, we now try to find out again that maybe the one platform, the one only thing to rely on may not be the exact right thing to improve supply chain excellence, at least not for all industry sectors and our companies. As we find out that as supply chain complexities, global demand patterns, and their complexity, demand volatility increase, standard supply chain platforms may not be the only one solution to actually overcome these challenges. And more, we try to recommend our clients to look into add-on components, meaning a very specialized niche product or niche technology to help, I don't know, significantly drive up forecasting accuracy when it comes to demand insights, or to significantly accelerate and speed up order processing, and so on and so forth. So I wouldn't say that we see this coupling together too often anymore. I would rather say that more and more supply chain decision makers look into or revamp the best of breed approach, securing a platform approach, but then identifying the right spots where superior, let's say, functionality and technology needs to be put on top of that.
Okay, great. I've got another one. Given all the supply chain disruptions in the past year or so, which digital levers have you seen be particularly valuable for resiliency? Any success stories?
There's one or two which I have on top of my mind. One is around insights into demand patterns. So there was this one client with whom we have, for whom we have delivered what you call a demand sensing initiative. That means establishing a machine learning based new planning function and technology support. And what it did was basically not only increasing forecasting accuracy on a very short time frame, on a 7 and 14-day horizon. So we're able to achieve double-digit forecasting accuracy improvements. But given the very nature of it and the demand sensing usually including more, let's say, planning and information sources than historic order information only, as the pandemic came, the algorithms recognized that something is different, something is wrong, right? And now what tended to be an endeavor and a business case purely fueled by improving on the shelf availability and revenue growth, all of a sudden got a lot of consideration as well for improving supply chain resilience, right? That means in that case, having intended to drive up revenue growth as a pure objective, and the way we went about it, the way we structured the planning function, and the way we put basically demand sensing on top of a very mature planning process, in the end, contributed significantly to supply chain resilience, because insight into demand spikes and drops were recognized, and our client could action accordingly. Another one which comes to my mind is more on the demand fulfillment side. So if you're in a situation where demand may be more unknown than it's been before, or where supply is unstable, that the last thing you want to happen is running an unreliable fulfillment operation, right? Because if you secure the supply, if you believe that you're able to fulfill at least part of the demand that you're having, you want to do this reliably, quickly, and again, by improving or by having improved supply chain KPIs like order processing speed, order capture and processing quality, in the end, it again significantly contributed to supply chain resilience, because existing demand, which was able to be satisfied, could then reliably be fulfilled. So that's maybe two examples of where we've been engaged and where the right level of supply chain transformation and the right level of targeting to achieve a frictionless supply chain actually resulted immediately in supply chain resilience.
Okay, that is currently all the questions that we've had. Any other questions come in? We've got about 2 more minutes. Otherwise, while we're waiting, Shirley and Jörg, any last minute thoughts? Anyone share?
Just that I think it is this is, you know, as we're kind of emerging from the I guess the dark cloud of the global pandemic, we're moving away from just kind of dealing with I guess single points of crisis into really trying to get ahead of the next crisis, right? And I think that all of what we've talked about today around, you know, different best practices to build more resiliency and flexibility and agility within supply chains are going to be absolutely critical for organizations to embed within their ongoing operations, because we are in an environment where we're going to see more disruptions rather than less. And so for organizations to continue to be competitive and successful, they're going to need to ensure that that their supply chains are ready for any of those disruptions coming through.
Right, and I couldn't agree more, right? Because after this disruption simply means were before the next one. And I clearly, getting back to the one question, asking what's different today. We've been talking about resilience ever before. I believe the difference is, at least I see in the market that now people take it serious, right? So there's not a single client of ours with whom we're not discussing next steps to increase supply chain resilience through all of the good means that Shirley and I were representing and discussing. And I believe that that's what makes me believe that something has changed. And if there is one good thing about the pandemic on supply chain, then maybe it has helped to bring back up the importance of supply chain resilience. With this, back to you, Amanda.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you, Shirley. Thank you, Jörg, for being here today. This was really a fantastic session. To all those who've attended, thank you so much for joining us. As I mentioned, you'll receive the recording within the next 24 hours. If you have any additional questions for our speakers, please feel free to reply to that email and I'll be working with them directly to get anything answered for you. Other than that, have a great day. Again, thank you, Shirley and Jörg, and we'll be together again soon. Thanks, everybody.
So much.
Thank you.